In this video, we're going to tackle task 3. So that's calculating the costs and qualities for treatment B. You can see that I have open the instructions on the left of my screen, and on the right, I have the model sheet. And in the previous task, in task 2, we calculated the transition matrix for treatment A, the sample path for treatment A. We did validity checks on all of these. We calculated the costs for treatment A and then the aggregated costs. So aggregated across all of the different health states. And then the qualities for treatment A, aggregated across all of the health states. And we're going to do the same again now for treatment B. So it starts off with the transition matrix. And so just like we did before, we need to bring over those transition probabilities, starting with the asymptomatic state. But we need to be careful. We need to use the ones for treatment B this time. So we need asymptomatic to asymptomatic with treatment B. So that's in X24. The next one's in Y24, so that's asymptomatic to mild. And Z24. And AA24. And I'm going to do these quickly because we've already done these. Something very, very similar for this in the previous task. So a little bit tedious doing this, but very important. And as I mentioned in the previous video, really, really important to actually reference the values that we've entered on the input sheet instead of just hard coding them on the model sheet. Because later in the exercise, we're going to make all of these input parameters probabilistic. And that means that on the input sheet, those values are going to change every time we recalculate the model. And it's really important that those get propagated through the model. So this is the last one we need from the input sheet, and then for the dead state, we can hard code them because it's uncontroversial that the probability of moving to any state other than dead is 0. I'm just going to wait for it to mark those first 3, and then we finish with a 1. There we go. Okay, so the next step is to do a validity check, and as I mentioned in the previous video, we know these are correct because they're being marked in real time, but when you're doing this yourself, you would need to do your own validity check. What we can do just to save a couple of seconds is take the validity check we used earlier, copy it, and just paste special formula only. Okay, then we have the sample path for treatment B, and these initial proportions are going to be the same as we had before. So again, let's save ourselves a few seconds. Let's select those 4 cells, copy them, come down, and I'm just going to do a paste special values only because these were just fixed values, 1, 0, 0, 0. And it's marked all of these at once. It says this whole range has correct values, and so these will all get colored green together. So step 3.3 is complete. We're now on to 3.4, and we've got to do subsequent cycles. Now, can we copy down this one? Remember, this is quite the equation. The issue we're going to have copying this down is that we have put in the dollar symbols. Those, when we copy it down, will not be adjusted. So we could copy it down and adjust it, or we could do it again. Maybe it's good practice to do it again. So how can you end up in the asymptomatic state on any given cycle? Well, you might be in the asymptomatic state on the previous cycle, and then we would multiply that by the probability of going from asymptomatic to asymptomatic. We're going to add that to the probability that you are in the mild state on the previous cycle, and we're going to multiply that by the probability of going from mild to asymptomatic. That's that one. Then we need to add the proportion of the cohort that were severe previously and multiply that by the probability of going from severe to asymptomatic. And then finally, we add on the proportion of the cohort that are dead, and we multiply that by the probability of going from dead to asymptomatic. And then we need to think about these where we put the dollar symbols in. And the way I like to think about this is when this gets copied down, we want these 4 cells here in D108 to 111. We want them to stay fixed. So we don't want them. We don't want the row number to increase. We want the 108 to stay fixed as we copy this down. So I'm going to put a dollar symbol before. Oh, I didn't need to do that. I'm going to put a dollar symbol before the 108 and before the 109 and the 110 and the 111. I want them to stay fixed as this formula gets copied down. And then as this formula gets copied across to the right, we want the D that comes before each of these numbers with the dollar symbol. We want those to change to an E, F, G, and so on. But when we copy it to the right, what we don't want are for the E, F, G, and H in row 91. We don't want those to change. So we need to lock the E in E91 and lock the F in F91, the G in G91, and the 8. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. That was going to be H91. I'll just re-enter that in. Okay, so that looks good to me. So I'm going to press enter. There we go, and it's just testing that all of these copied formula are correct, and they are correct. So step 3.4 is complete, and 3.5 has been unlocked. So that's just validating the sample path, and yeah, we can borrow the equation that we used before and do a paste special formula only, and you can see that that is referencing these 4 cells as intended. Okay, now we're moving on to the costs for treatment B. And are these going to be similar to what we had before? Yeah, I mean, this formula we had for treatment A, it's referencing D40, and that's in the same relative position as D108 is to D125. So we actually probably could get away with copying this, except that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight this, copy it, and then come down, and instead of D40, I need it to be D108. So I'm going to change D40 to 108, and instead of it being the cost of treatment A, I need to change that to a B. But otherwise, I can keep the cost of asymptomatic the same as before. Okay, now thinking ahead to what I need next, I'm going to it's this one, isn't it? And we've got the cost of treatment A plus the cost of being mild. And instead of referencing D41, I need to reference D109. And instead of the cost of A, I need to change that to B. So if you wish, you can just enter these formulas from scratch. It's good practice to do that. I'm just saving a couple of seconds here because I know that I can reuse most of these formulas. And then for severe, we're going to, that's going to be exactly the same, isn't it, as this. We just need to change the D42. I'm going to try just copying this whole cell and pasting as a formula. And you can see it's changed D42 to D110 as we expected. So that actually just worked. And then for the cost of being dead, there's no need to copy that. It's just 0. Let's just enter a 0. Okay, the next step, so 3.10, is to calculate the aggregated costs. We can use a very similar formula that we used here for treatment A. Let's copy that. And yeah, do the paste special formula only. Okay, 3.10 is complete. Now we're doing the qualies for treatment B. And again, we can save a few moments by looking at what we did for treatment A. And we can actually use exactly the same formula. When we copy this down, D40 is going to be updated. And now it says D108, which is this, which is the proportion for treatment B. And we should be able to do exactly the same thing for mild. So I'm going to copy that and paste the formula. And this works because I did not lock the row number. So the row number is getting updated when I copy that formula down because it's a relative cell reference rather than an absolute cell reference. Let's do severe. And then for dead, it's really simple. Just put a 0 in. Okay, and then we need to do the aggregated qualies, and we can just borrow that formula from treatment A, copy it, and paste it in here. So that's 3.15 complete, 3.16 has been unlocked. And if we now look at the instruction sheet, compare the instructor's formulas to your own, what you'll see is that it says the model sheet has now expanded to show all the cycles up to 61. So you can see we can now scroll to the right. We couldn't do this before. And all of these other cycles have been pre-entered for you by the instructor. If you recall, we entered formulas in cycle 1 and these were automatically copied across to cycle 6 just to check that the formulas were copying properly. But all of the other formulas in cycle 7, cycle 8 were, and so on, were already entered for us. So you can look at the formula in a future cycle, compare it to what you just entered. You'll see this is very similar. The instructor formula did not have brackets. The one that we entered just now did have brackets, but it's mathematically equivalent. You can see the same thing. Costs, that is exactly the same. So yeah, take a look at these. Another thing that you might find useful at the top of the screen, so in J14, there's a tick box, and you can use that if you wish to hide most of the columns. So scrolling all the way across to cycle 61, there's a lot of numbers there that you probably don't need to pay much attention to. For a lot of the formulas we're going to be entering in this exercise, it's useful to be able to see the first few cycles and the last cycle in order that we can drag across if we need to, but we don't usually need to pay much attention to cycle 60, 59, 58, and so on. So there's no harm in hiding them. If you do want to show them again at any time, you can just tick that box again and wait a few seconds and it will unhide all of those columns. So that's just a way of tidying the sheet if you wish, if you don't want to see all of these numbers. And so when you're ready to finish this task, you click that tick box on the instruction sheet. And that's task 3 completed. And I'll see you in the next video for task 4.